Welcome to Past Locate, Finding the Forgotten and the Past, a channel where we explore cases listed on the UK Government Bona Vacantia list and see if we can find any heirs to these unclaimed estates. This case study is of a lady called Margaret Olwyn Elizabeth Deibert. It is classed as an historic case as it was added to the list way back in 2008. She died on the 3rd of November 2007 at her home in Nash, Pembrokeshire, over in West Wales, where she was also in fact born back in 1938. The Bona Vacantia also stated she was known as Margaret Olwyn Elizabeth Deibert, but in fact, my research has found she preferred to go by just the name Olwyn. She was born to parents David Penrith Jones and Margaret Hannah Goodrich, who married on the 17th of April 1933. The maternal family home was at Nash Lodge, Milton Road, Pembroke. This is where Olwyn was born and died. Here is the property after she died in 2009, and as you can see, it is in bad repair and overgrown with ivy. It eventually sold in 2015 for £270,000 and now looks like a lovely family home with new windows and rendering. On Googling Olwyn's name, I only found one article from the Tenby Observer from November 2003, where it states she was a keen gardener and had won a prize for her vegetables at the Kilgetty Autumn Show that year. She was also a member of the Pembroke 21C Community Association, who minuting her passing in December 2007. Olwyn had married twice in her lifetime. First to Neffyd Ellis in 1962, they had no children and got divorced. She then went on to marry Rudolph Frederick Deibert in 1981. Rudolph had been married before and had a daughter that unfortunately died in infancy. He passed on New Year's Eve 2003. Here is his headstone and note. Olwyn is buried with him. Notice her name here is Margaret Hannah Olwyn, so she was using her mother's middle name too. Olwyn had no siblings and no children of her own, so we need to look for siblings of her parents. Her mother was born on the 9th of July 1901. The family seemed to interchange the name Goodrich with Goodridge. Here on the 1901 census, Olwyn's maternal grandparents are living at Nash, and they had previously married on the 1st of October 1898. By 1911 census, they have been married for 12 years and only have one child, being Olwyn's mother, Margaret. Again, by 1921 census, they are all still listed together at Nash Lodge, and so her mother was an only child. This means there are no maternal heirs. Her maternal grandfather died in 1940 and left his estate to Olwyn's mother, his daughter, Margaret. This eventually was left to Olwyn, so was in the same family for over 100 years. Let's look at Olwyn's father. He was David Jones, a very common Welsh name therefore. Research was long and took me down a lot of dead ends and false starts. He did have an unusual middle name of Penrith, sometimes spelt with an I instead of a Y. First, I start with the 1939 register for him and Olwyn's mother. He is actually with his father-in-law, his wife and Olwyn, all at Nash Lodge. Note Olwyn herself is blacked out. The 1939 register gives David's date of birth as the 9th of May 1904. I can see he has the middle initial of P, and as they are at Nash Lodge, it is the correct family. From the marriage registration, his middle name is clearly Penrith, and there is only one David Penrith born in 1909. Confirming this is the same family. Looking on the GRO site, I see his mother's maiden name was recorded as Lewis. This again is a very common name. I spent many hours trying to figure this all out and went down a rabbit hole of a David P. Jones, but this was not our David. His middle name turned out to be Philip. I decided to spend £3 on getting the image of his birth certificate. This cannot be used for claims, but would give me the details I needed to continue with my research. Looks like he was actually born on the 13th of May 1904, but must have decided to move it to the 9th. Perhaps superstitions and too many Friday the 13th birthdays meant he decided to change it to the 9th. His father is another David Jones, a coal miner, and his mother is Annie Jones, formerly Lewis. He was born at 25 Hilddew Road, Bargoed. I was then able to locate the family in 1911 census. The record shows David and Annie have had 6 children, but only 3 survive, but only 2 are listed on the record, with our David Penrith not showing. There is a visitor called My Lewis, probably a relative of Annie. Also, I noted the address is 44 MacDonald Road, Bargoed. Which later in 1926, I find a David Penrith listed on an electoral roll at number 52 with a person called Catherine Winstone, so close ties. Olwyn's paternal grandparents married in Q3 of 1901. And here are the sons' births listed to match the names on the 1911 census. Lovely Welsh names of James Olwyn and Gwen Ifer Jones. On the 1921 census, the family group are living at 25 Arnold Place, Bargoed. But again, David is not listed with the family. I then find David on the 1911 census with the lady we mentioned earlier, a Catherine Winston. He is just listed as D. Jones and was born in Bargoed. Then I find him still with Catherine and her husband on the 1921 census record. Catherine was formerly a Jones and was his aunt, as she is only 2 years older than his father David, who in 1921 is 58 and she is 60. Here is her marriage to Enoch Winston in 1899. Note her father was a David Jones and deceased, and there is a David Jones as a witness. This will be our David Penrith's father, Olwyn's grandfather and Catherine's brother. Enoch died in 1923, and his probate leaves a lot of money to Olwyn's father. £3,802 in 1923 is worth around £300,000 in today's money in 2025. Catherine was still alive and David must have taken care of her until her death. As mentioned before, I can find an electoral registration from 1926, 27 and 1928 with David and Catherine living at 52 MacDonald Road, Bargoed. Catherine died later that year, and here is her probate, again a lot of money going to Olwyn's father, David Penrith Jones. David Penrith Jones later died on 4th of December 1965, and this is listing on the Gazette pages, as well as the probate entry on Ancestry. I then turn my attention to looking for his brothers, as they are the key to any heirs. Going back to David's birth, the address in 1911 was where a family of Lewis lived, probably the family of Annie. Looking at further electoral registration records, David and Annie Jones lived at 25 Arnold Place, Glaniraffan, Sirowy, Wales from 1914 to 1935. Here is David Jones Sr. and uncles at this address in 1933. Annie must have passed, as she only lists at this address only until 1928. In 1930 and 1931, David Penrith is there too, after Catherine had died back in 1928. This is the proof the family is connected and David, James and Gwen are brothers. Yes, he is going by the name Penrith, but this is him. By the 1939 register, a family of Jenkins were living there. I found a James Jones, married and living at 63 Parkview, Mountain Ash with his wife Evelyn. They appear to have a child based on the black line below them. However, I then found via Evelyn's will that I purchased for £1.50 that this was a James Arthur Jones, so not the James Alwyn we are looking for. As I said, lots of dead ends on this case. Only one James Olwyn Jones was born between 1905 and 1909, which is the person we are looking for. Therefore, this death in 1957 of a James Olwyn Jones aged 50 has to be the person we are looking for. Note he had moved to Yorkshire. His probate leaves his estate to a lady called Alice Sheffings, a spinster. It looks like Alice was his housekeeper. Searching for her in 1939 register, I found James, and in fact David Sr. with them. It gives James' profession as a congregational minister, and David Sr. is now incapacitated due to old age. It therefore looks like James did not marry, and so there are no heirs from his line. Finally, for him, I found this telephone book entry from 1957 published just before he died. That just leaves Gwyn Ifor Jones. There is a death of a Gwyn Ifor Jones in 1949 living at 31 Common Road, Stratford. He died with no will but his intestate, but as he was married his estate went to his wife Nellie. Trouble is this does not mention any children. He left £404 to her, which would be worth around £20,000 now. He was only 40 years old when he died, so this would make him the right age, and born in 1909. He had married Nellie Sproston in 1944 in Northwich, Cheshire. She was 29 and he was 35. But there are no Jones-Sproston births in the area they lived, and as he died only 5 years later of a diabetic coma, it does not look likely there are any heirs. Nellie never remarried and moved back to Cheshire, where she died nearly 40 years later, aged 77. She had several nieces and nephews, so they probably inherited her estate. That means that this is another case of no heirs. Again, I estimate Olwyn's estate to be at least £500,000 that the UK government have just scooped up. I'm sure she had many friends and good causes she could have left her estate to, but without a will, this did not happen. In future episodes, I hope to link up with a free will service after I have done some research. Remember to like and subscribe, and until the next case, happy heir hunting.